All right, welcome to this webinar arranged by TCO Development. My name is Martin Soderberg, and I've been working for TCO Development for many years. And during the last 15 years, I've been located at our Asia office in Taipei. But today, I just happen to be in our head office in Stockholm, enjoying this beautiful summer day that we have here. So today's webinar is the second and last in a series of webinars that we call Circular IT in Practice. And during the last webinar, we got to hear about some different initiatives in this field, from closing the loop and circular computing. And if you missed that one, you can visit our website and watch it on demand. And today we're going to hear from the purchaser's perspective. For me, this is going to be very interesting because I'm mostly in contact with our stakeholders in the IT industry, so the suppliers, if you will. But today we'll get to hear from the other side of the spectrum, from the buyer. So for me personally, it's going to be very, very interesting to hear more about this side of the story. Today's guest speaker is Kuno van Geet, and he is a strategic advisor for circular procurement within the Ministry of Infrastructure and Water Management in the Netherlands government, the Rijkswaterstaat. He told me that he would not join unless I tried to at least pronounce that in Dutch. And Kuno is a bit of a pioneer in this space, and he has run a number of pilots on circular procurement in a number of different categories. His approach is really about getting practical and starting at a level where purchasers can really implement something. So starting small is okay, in other words. I think he's going to give us some examples of what works and also his experience from what doesn't work. So there should be some interesting lessons there for all of us. But before we let Kuno in, I just want to give you a very brief introduction to TCO Certified. So TCO Certified is a global sustainability certification for IT products. It covers social and environmental responsibility as well as a number of health and safety requirements. And it's used by purchasers as a way to choose products that meet a very comprehensive set of criteria, and it's used by the IT industry as a way to communicate compliance with these criteria. And one thing that is very, very important for us is that the verification of compliance is independent and trustworthy. We are a member of the Global Eco-Labeling Network, and we follow a ISO standard called ISO 14024 for type 1 eco labels. Having an independent verification is important not only prior to issuing the certificate, but also during follow-up market surveillance testing and factory audits and so on. And we cover 8 different product categories today, and we have certified over 3,000 product models so far, and we have about 22 different IT brands as certifying customers, which include the most well-known international IT brands. We launched the latest generation of criteria in December 2018 called TCO Certified Generation 8. And we follow a 3-year development cycle, so you can expect the next generation to be available by the end of year 2021. And in Generation 8 was quite a big step from the previous generation. We have updated a number of criteria and introduced a number of new criteria. And we aim to make improvements at the high impact points in the life cycle of an IT product. We have chosen to focus on 3 different things. The first one is a circular approach to IT products. We do this by having criteria aimed at extending product lifetime and reuse, criteria for battery life, product durability, and better material recovery. Also reduction of hazardous chemicals, meaning cleaner materials that can be recycled. And the second thing that we focus on is supply chain responsibility and transparency. And here we focus on closing non-conformities and verifying supply chain improvements. There are also new criteria for responsible mineral sourcing and anti-corruption management, and also process chemicals. The third focus area is supporting the Sustainable Development Goals. This includes responsible production and consumption. And by using TCO certified, you can get quantifiable results that can be used for stakeholders in their sustainability reporting. So today's webinar is about circularity. We have sustainability criteria in many different areas, but here are some examples of criteria that are directly linked to circularity. Replaceable components, making sure that certain vital components are possible to replace in an easy way and to which extends the lifetime of the product. Standardized connectors. We require USB Type-C, which is becoming the most common standard for connectors. Then you can avoid getting a stack of useless adapters and peripherals that will become e-waste eventually. Product durability testing. Of course, if you have a product that can survive a drop from a table and can be used in more harsh environments, it will last longer, and therefore this is also a sustainability benefit. Battery longevity and replaceability. For battery-driven products, it's important that the battery can withstand a certain number of charging cycles before it goes out of service, and also that the user can replace the battery. And last but not least, secure data removal. So often people and organizations hesitate to send off their old products for refurbishing or recycling because they're worried that sensitive data might end up in the wrong hands. Therefore, we require that the brand owner offers a link to a free of charge software for data removal so that the user can feel safe to let go of old products. And if you want to get the complete criteria document and other information about TCO Certified, you can visit our website, tcocertified.com, where you'll find this and much more. Okay, so that was a very brief introduction to TCO Certified. So let's now hand over to Kuno van Geet, who will give us some very practical tips for purchasers on how to buy products in a more sustainable and circular way. So let's let Kuno up on this virtual stage. Kuno, are you there?
Yes. If you
and
can all hear me.
Did I pronounce your name okay?
Yes, you're typically not Dutch, but it's close.
All right, okay.
And indeed, I'm working for Rijkswaterstaat, which is not translated in English. It's part of the Ministry of Infrastructure and Water Management. And to be a little bit more clear about my role, I'm not doing the pilots myself, but we support a lot of pilots. And it's our role to actually translate policy into practice. And so that's the role. And we have a lot of people actually on the background which actually know more of all the very specific details. We are doing this working on circular IT and procurement is for different reasons. And one of them is also, like TCO is working on, is a support to the Sustainable Global Development Goals, in which we have been related to the UN program of the One Planet Network. And we are starting a partnership on ICT under that. And the reason for that I will explain during this webinar. So my roles first is go to the policy drivers. One of the things that we notice in practice is that when you go to an IT procurer, he doesn't know about policy because it's not his job. He's just there to buy some appliances, some laptops, some phones or tablets or a data center even. And we are in the ministry which relates to environment, and the policy drivers for IT are often international, based on child labor, conflict mining and stuff like that. So the reason why we start out doing this international is also based on these kind of social issues. And if you look down, a better option right now already is like what Closing the Loop is doing. It's getting phones back from Africa and getting them recycled into gold, so that at least we take care of some of the problems. But for normal IT procurement, if you go into this, we found that the social issues in the chain of IT are quite complex. So if you look at this picture, this is actually, there's a web link on that I can send out later, where someone is keeping track of all these kind of the chain in IT. And it's quite interesting to see how complex it is. And the next slide also supports that. That's been a project, I think it was in Germany, from Nager IT. And there you see that they've tried to make a fair computer mouse. Well, even a computer mouse, you wouldn't think of the number of components in this computer mouse. But if you look at it, you will see that some of them are yellow or blue. And there you actually know, these are usually more European countries, that they somehow take care of social criteria better in environmental stuff than if you go down further in the chain, because you don't know. And to go down in the chain and to get this kind of more sustainable, it's quite difficult also due to the procurement law, and because the resellers don't know all the details and how to actually do that. So when we went to circular procurement in this respect, we were faced with the problems that we were looking at this chain and how to change that. And up to that point, we didn't have anything more than just Energy Star and some basic criteria. So how to go forward from that? I often show this slide in which we ask the audience, like, what is this? Right now I will not ask because no one will respond, but some actually of the attendees, I know some of them might have seen this one already in other pictures. What people see there is waste, sometimes the birds, usually they don't see the big engine in the middle. But the whole reason of showing this is the waste that is a result of our procurement. So a couple of, so this is output of our procurement. And that's what we need to realize. And when we went to the discussions, when we started circular procurement in 2013, the first thing we really realized, it's not just about procuring, but it's also about taking care of the output after you have procured it. So that's one of the lessons we learned. And then the question was, of course, why do we want to change that? And the reason we want to change that is because this procurement in these organizations is really, you need to change the organization itself. And procurement is a very good way to get products changed and to get the organizations changed. So that's with everything, every time you buy something new in the market, there will be new business case by the supplier. So if you do that, you practice what you preach and you change the market. So there's two sides of it. And the one thing is just to show off that you're really doing a good job as a government, and we like that. We want to show off. But one of the problems here, and that's with IT very specific, your impact in the market is quite small because you're such a small player in the total arena. And how to deal with that? So that was one of the experiences we had, and where we were kind of, disillusioned that we had a couple of pilots. I'll talk a little bit more in detail, but we didn't get the impact in the market. So we just were showing that we're doing a good job, but the suppliers didn't take us serious. And that's one of the difficulties we have. But if you look at the next slide, we do have, and the next one, enormous amount of money we spent in the EU. So we should have an impact. However, this impact is usually just being done by individual suppliers, procurers, And if we keep on doing a little bit different all the time, the one is going in one direction, the one is other direction, we don't have an impact. But going back to how the circular procurement is different from normal procurement, we go to the next slide, we see that normal procurement is based on getting a kind of better product, which we did before. We included Energy Star, stuff like that. If you look at circular procurement, then you look more at the opportunities, which are a little bit usually beyond your normal way of thinking that you are involved in that. And that's the thing that a procurer is meant to actually buy a computer, but is not looking at the reuse and recycling. That's usually another department in their own organization. And the one who's taking care of repairs and maintenance is also another person. And if you even go further down the chain, things like the social aspects I started on, that's even more difficult, because what is your responsibility in there? And we had quite a bit of discussion there, and not everyone agrees. One example is if you have phones and you refurbish them, but afterwards they often end up in the African market or in India, because there's a better market for refurbished phones than in Europe. And they may end up being burned there after all, because you cannot track it anymore. So other organizations say, no, we need to keep it in the loop in the Netherlands, so that we can make sure that in the recycling phase, it actually ends up in the right recycling plant, which is currently the best one in Belgium, Umicore. And in Africa, they don't have a recycling facility on that kind of level yet. Of course, we need to build one, but that will take quite a while, and everyone's thinking about it. But until that time, how do we track this kind of waste? And how do we get it back to the place where it's supposed to not harm anyone? So that's one of the big differences between normal procurement and circular procurement. You're actually stretching your responsibility to the level actually where you relate to policy more than just the normal responsibility of the procurer. So if we go next, to see what that means, if I look at it from what we did before, is that we looked at basic criteria like Energy Star and upgrading Energy Star, the WE directive, which might not have even been in the criteria because it's usually after you sell it, so that you, for people outside of the Europe, the WE directive is to make sure that all the e-waste is ending up at the right place for a certified recycling facility. And the second level is actually where you see what we started at the circular procurement. We started piloting, so what can you do more? And the first thing we did is try to look at what you can buy, and we didn't get to the solution. What we did include, however, is look at the second life. And I think right now in many countries there are many options in SMEs, locally, nationally, that can actually take care of your old IT and give it a second life. So that's quite an important big step to do that. And I'll tell you a little bit later in the pilots, that is not always that easy to make this step, even though you think it is, well, it's a simple solution, why not do that? So the third is where we are about right now, and that's where we went also to TCO, and the other one EP'd, and there's also Nordic Swan and Blauwe Engel and other labels, so we are not having shares in TCO. Just to show that there is a kind of level on labeling that can help procurers to actually take a next step, which is not leaping and very advanced and difficult to do. And the final step, and that's the thing we want to focus on also in our international collaboration under the UN, can we actually create more volume and collaboration between procurers to make more impact in what we really want? For example, the Fairphone, can we create a fair laptop or a fair, another Fairphone? For those of you who don't know a Fairphone, that's I think it's a Dutch phone even. It's not working perfectly, and I understand they're working on the next upgrade, but it's completely made cradle to cradle and take back system, and they have taken social aspects into account as much as possible. However, it's not an Apple and a Samsung, and they don't have the big numbers and the market to actually make a big change. So if I look at procures, the things we usually recommend, and that's also within our criteria system, usually there are many countries that have basic criteria that you can always include. A very simple one was you don't want to have any mercury in your IT laptops, desktops, whatever. But even those kind of criteria sometimes get people in the market upset because somehow due to EU law, there should be kind of allowance still of some mercury, and we said no, there is no mercury allowed anymore because mercury is really bad for you, and there is enough availability in the market. So these are the basics that everyone should be always doing, and if they don't do it, it's really weird that they don't. Energy Star, of course. There are more criteria in the basics, but generally this is something like a no-brainer. Everyone should have been doing this already for 5 years at least. So the next step, that's why I called step 0. We should have been doing that already, of course. The first step, where you say, okay, I'm going to go for circular, is what I was just saying. Look how you can actually give your IT as good as possible a second life. And we did a pilot on that. We started the pilot in 2013, but we discussed how to wipe the data for 2 years almost. And we're still in the pilot phase of the national government in getting it to a supplier, or actually a company, an SME, that actually refurbishes it and gives it another life for 2 or 3 years. And one of the things we realized, it's very important to look into the details of the organization. For example, the value of an old IT is less if you don't include details like cables, the license for the software, if you take off the tags of the company names and stuff like that. And there we realized that everyone was just looking at the waste. And in this waste, you don't care about the quality and whether you break it or whether it's damaged. But once you go for the second life, you need to look into the quality of how to maintain your assets. So that's a very important thing. And also there you need to dig into the market, because some of the companies out there, and there are quite many of them, some of them are really good, but some of them are just brokers. So they sell it off after they just secondhand, or they don't even refurbish. So you can actually ask for, you need to make sure that the quality of the refurbishment is at a certain level. So you also need, in selling, which is a little bit different from procurement, it's a kind of auction. You need to make sure that the quality in that second life is also in a line in what you want. So we wanted to have it upgraded as much as possible, a new memory in there, paint job possibly, that it looks nice again, a new license, new image on that, stuff like that. And we wanted to make sure it stayed possibly as close to home as possible. So you can also sell it to Africa again, because you help out there, but actually there are a lot of poor people here as well. So that's also an option. These are things that you have to decide upon, and there's not just one solution. Everyone has a little bit of a different opinion on that. So need to know the market and look at the details. And very interesting example is that we forgot to inform the people who moved the screens, because screens were already sold before, and they just stacked them on top of each other, because that's what they always did when they had to be shipped off for recycling. And then the 30% of all these screens broke. So the quality of what you can sell afterwards is, of course, much less. So everyone in that process has to be involved. And in this respect, you find that circular procurement means that it's no longer just the task of a procurer, it's the task also of people internally taking care of the equipment, repairing it, stuff like that. So the other part, what we tried out in an example, is trying to buy refurbished. So the city of Utrecht was doing that. And that's quite an easy one. You can just ask for refurbished IT. However, what we learned in refurbished IT is that there's no formulation yet of what is refurbished IT. And the availability of refurbished IT is currently lower than the demand. So they didn't get what they wanted, and they were not taken seriously by the market. So in order to get this kind of change, it's not just getting the people internally committed to that they actually refurbished laptops. And a lot of times you can do that quite easily, because if you have a lot of data in the cloud, you don't need the best quality laptops anymore, because the power of the laptop is less dependent on all the software, because that's in the cloud somewhere. So it also relates to your software and the way you've managed your infrastructure. Again, it's important here to know what can the market deliver, and to discuss, and that's also what we need to do in collaboration. What do we mean with refurbished? Is this a computer that's being sent to someone for 3 weeks and being boxed again? No. So that's another story in there. And another lesson was also that the timing that you replace your old IT might be, well, 2-3 years, because you always do it. But if you look at the value for the second life, you might come up with a different rhythm. And of course, there are a lot of consultants who can help you with that. But that's an important aspect to know. And in the tender of refurbished and selling it to the market, we also have a discussion, is this 1 or 2 contracts? And there we get to a lot of discussions we have with brands. You can also include it in your tendering project that you have for whatever, HP or Dell or Fujitsu, and you say, can you deliver this laptop to me and have a take-back scheme? And I think also one of the criteria of TCO and others, having a take-back scheme is quite important, so they already know what to do, that they can take it back. And that's what I'm missing sometimes still. What happens after they take it back? Are they just sending it off to the recycling facility, or actually upgrading for a new life? So the question for procure is here, do we have 1 or 2 contracts? So you can also, and that's one of the problems we had in our procurement law, we need to take care that we also have some lots in the tender that are available for SMEs. So if you just give them an opportunity also to have the upgrading and refurbishment done by third party, you usually have an SME option in there as well. So that's kind of struggle you have. There's not just one big solution. That's everyone has to figure out the best way to do it, which relates to their organization. Then we went to the national government, and then the Dutch national government, and I asked actually the category manager who did that, or was involved in that, to explain it. He unfortunately wasn't available for today. So the first step we did, I already explained, is that we tried to actually have discarded IT refurbished, and that actually saved us money. After that, we went to a framework contract. I didn't include the lessons here, I see, but we had 2 lessons there. One of them, in the framework contract, you can at least take out of some blocking criteria. So some blocking criteria, it's a weird word perhaps in English, but is taking out the word new. In our old framework contracts, we used the word we only buy new equipment. So if you just take out the word new, you are allowed to experiment with refurbished IT. And when we talked to some companies, said, oh, we already do that many years. So something which was for us quite surprising and quite an ambition was very normal in other parts of the market. So this is always like, yeah, it might seem that we are doing some pilots, and for other people it's already common business. And the other part was that we took out the list of brand names. So whenever there's a kind of disruptor, new initiative like Fairphone, you can actually get them on the list as well. And to at least include all the basic criteria, which we have no-brainer that everyone can supply that. So the one who actually won the first time we resold it was this company. I can give you about 12 more these kind of organizations right now in the Netherlands and also outside. And I heard that you already had another webinar on circular computing, which is, I think, a global market, a global company. Also, Sims is being global. And it's important, again, to know this market and to have in your meet the buyer events or whatever you call them. If you do your market assessment, not just look at the normal brands and reseller to invite, but also to look at these kind of organizations. I heard you already had been given a webinar on closing the loop. Still, for us, we knew the initiative, but we hadn't transformed it yet into criteria. So the first, to explain this a little bit, it's like including a little bit of an additional money in your contract. So for each phone you buy, you give €3 extra about. I think that's about the amount. And they will take a phone. This is in case of Africa. They usually take them out of Africa to get destroyed. So it's a little bit like the carbon offsetting, kind of a compensation for the materials. It's kind of material offsetting. And the first time is being tried now by the provinces, a collaboration of provinces doing this, and they actually included it as an award criterion. This is not a legal one, this is a kind of summary, so don't copy it. Compensate resources for each new phone by extracting old phones from the market, and in this case, Closing the Loop can collaborate with whatever supplier you have. There are different ways they can collaborate with all kinds of service organizations or suppliers or resellers. So this is kind of interesting. We also did it now with the national government. So every other contract for phones we buy, we pay another €3, and they will try to get a phone back from Africa, and they will report on that. They will actually do it. So these are small steps in circularity, but I think they're still essential, because a lot of times we want to change the big thing, but we forget to take care of the small things first. And these are small steps you can take today. There's nothing who's prohibiting. So the next step is actually to go to the better labeling, and that's where we are right now. In the better labeling, we'll find that we were kind of confused because TCO, EP, Blauwe Engel, as far as we knew, we never came across that in the Netherlands, and we didn't know why. EP has been out in the US already for a long time, and Blauwe Engel is mostly Nordic, so that's not really outside of the Nordics. And TCO has been out there as well, but we realized it wasn't being used. So that's actually quite a simple step as well. In order to make our lives a little bit simpler, don't go creating your own criteria, but look at these, include them in a criteria, and use the TCO as a kind of verification. That's always a big discussion whether you can use a label directly in criteria. We usually say, well, do it the other way around and just describe the main issues and use the labels as a verification system. And for the people who are really into this, I'm not quite sure if this is an eco-label type 1. And I don't want to go into this discussion as well, because each country even has a different kind of lawyer judgment on these kind of stuff. But we include it now in a national contract, I think just as TCO, and no one's complaining so far. But then again, to be honest, we are now working on creating a criteria that actually is based for both TCO, EP, so we can have a kind of criteria for all of them, and everyone can start using it. Well, if we have a kind of common criteria for that, it's very easy to use. It's a lot easier than asking the reseller to look into these details themselves, because they will have lots of work and very much difficulty to actually get all the evidence in place. So the next step, and this is the big challenge, and we're not expecting this change to happen tomorrow. This will take many years, but we need to look into actually developing new products that can be easier made circular, like the Fairphone. And the Fairphone is a very good example where you just go back to the store and you get a new camera in there when there's an upgrade. You can take them apart yourself. You can replace the battery yourself. You don't even have to go to iFixit guidelines to find out how you do it. It's relatively easy, but it doesn't relate currently to the trends. Like it needs to be slimmer, it needs to be waterproof. So there's a bit of discussion there and a bit of difference in what policy would like and what the companies are doing and expecting the customers like. So we hear also in the consumer industry, to make an example, that the phones are usually kind of consumer industry, and the laptops also have usually a business variety, a business type laptop. And to actually change that, and I'm looking at the Fairphone, but getting a fair or circular laptop might actually be easier than getting a fair phone. Still, the phone is also iconic because the volumes of phones is actually even, well, more and more than any laptops that are being made. And everyone has them and everyone's complaining about how fast they are becoming obsolete because of the software, because they break down, because they cannot resist falling from 5 meters or whatever. So there's a lot of discussion and iconic discussions about that, and we want to go there. We did a couple of pilots with Fairphone. It is really what we want. The quality is getting there, but it isn't there yet. And also we had some issues in the software of the company. So if we want to go there, we need to make sure, one, it's not just one example. We need to have more than disruptors like Fairphone. But also we need to make sure it's on the quality level that we want. And that's why we need to actually talk to the industry in how to do that. And one of the things, I didn't include the slide this time, but one of the things we notice is that we usually don't talk to the brands. We talk to the resellers. So in order to change that, we are looking in this partnership in how can we get a dialogue with the brands, and can we create a kind of market niche for them as well, that they might come up with these kind of products for us. And of course, then after we make such a perfect product, we want to make sure that it gets back to them and upgrade in the right way. So these are quite a bit of steps. We are looking right now maybe to the 2030 might be a good objective. It gives us about 10 years. And in the meantime, the market should be able to create that. And one of the questions, of course, is how many of these how many laptops do you need to buy before you can get a special laptop for you, which is completely made to be circular, because you can only make it circular if you include some effort yourself as well internally. This is how a Fairphone looks when you upgrade it. It's not difficult actually. And there's a lot of guidance also on design, what you need to do to make the design as easy as possible. Just use the same type of screws everywhere. Don't use glue, make clickable things, and make sure you can take them apart or whatever. So we also need to include the design industry at some point here, because they know there's many products out there already that have been made to be circular. I never say circular products because they're only circular if you make sure that they end up in the reuse phase. But that kind of knowledge needs to be in this industry. And when you look back at the first kind of slides, then you will see how difficult that will be in this chain. Still, Fairphone made quite a big effort and has gotten, I don't know how much percentage of that, but so they make quite an effort and it can be done in some way. And it's our role as governments to make sure that we really are now combining efforts to do this. This is a slide which is in progress and it doesn't have, it's not finalized yet. But we want to set up this kind of group, core group, that will look at what we need to do, kind of daily management. We want to include procurement, we want to include policy of governments to sign up to this thing and doing pilots. And one of the working groups will be, is what I explained, to create this criteria that everyone can use directly, and it will be evidenced by these labels. And we also will have criteria possibly outside of the labeling, which has to do with other stuff. And we want to look at organizations who really want to take forward the more advanced levels in pilots. And we actually also want to have a working group on design. So we're not quite sure how to include that one, because that's for me kind of a higher ambition. And there's also a bit of a working group already. Well, there are already lots of platforms talking about transparency and social criteria. So we include that. We are not focusing on putting that forward into the next level, because that's a very difficult discussion. And our role is mostly to look at, well, it's all sustainable. Social is included, but the main issue is getting it circular and looking at the design of the products and how to create this process. So this is the way, maybe explaining a little better. One of the actions we will do over the, well, probably this year is, to create a common criteria set. And actually, it's not that difficult. It's just looking at the schemes that are out there, extracting the criteria and looking whether you can make new criteria out of it. And criteria is work that has been done already in many countries. I think there are about 10 to 15 countries creating these kind of criteria. But these are usually not related to the labeling system yet. And if they are, of course, please let me know so we don't duplicate that. And of course, the brand owners and TCO also know this. So it shouldn't be that much work. Still, my experience with setting a common criteria set is always more debatable than you think. So that's the kind of thing we want to take on. And also we want to have people who sign up to the partnership to say that we will be using this and we will transpose this into national criteria or regional criteria, and we'll start using it. And the second level is that all the partners in the partnership will also look at creating more pilots to learn from the higher ambitions. And these can be like, okay, we go for the product as a service, or we go into refurbished, buying of refurbished, or we go into getting less laptops there or more working in the cloud, or whatever you come up with. You usually realize once you go into pilots, there are always more options than you could think of before. But that's the kind of innovation we need. We need to know everyone has to explore their own territory. Also on social, I see a lot of new initiative. And the third level is actually to get from the higher ambitions to the further level of ambitions in design and a different type of laptop or phone or even data center or whatever. You have to create a dialogue and who's talking to who to get that done. So we are doing stakeholder analysis on that, or actually we have collaboration there with consultant Marcel Jacobs, who's doing that for us in the market, and we are doing stakeholder analysis internally, and we want to find out how to create that, because we want to talk about the real stuff and not talking to a reseller who's talking to a marketeer from a brand who's talking to. So we need to talk to people who are going to make decisions on the level that we will create an impact. So that's the story for me, in which I always say some at the final thing. You don't have to do it all. You can just take the first step. And everyone has his own situation in which they can start out and do the first thing they can do tomorrow. So that's it. And now time for questions.
All right, thank you, Kuno. Very interesting. And we have received quite a lot of questions, actually. So I'll be reading these to you and see if you can provide an answer, perhaps.
Who knows?
Yeah, we'll see. Okay, I'm reading what it says here. Innovation of product specifications is creation of desire to buy new products, marketing and market pull. This is a potential contradiction with circular economy. What can procurement do to drive products towards more harmonization and less product type differentiation? Now, if I may,
I like it.
Yeah, if I may rephrase that a bit. I guess what the person is asking is that, I mean, very often.
I know what he's meant. I know what he means.
All right.
It's a very typical. I just 2 weeks ago I had a very big discussion internally with the innovation department in infrastructure. All innovation is good, and then they developed actually a list of all the possible innovations in the market. And they think every innovation is good because it's driving the economy. And we said, no, there are different innovations we don't want. And blocking out some of the, or erasing some of the innovations actually helps everyone to focus and to get the mass we want. We don't want to monopolize just one innovation, but we do need some working streams or some innovation streams. And this is a very typical thing in circular economy. The one is in textiles, we looked at that. We found that getting recycled content in the products is essential to drive innovation, and it's a kind of focused action. If you don't focus on that and everyone's going each different directions, you will never get the industry to build the machines for that. So a very intriguing one, and it's very difficult discussions with the departments of economics sometimes.
Oh, okay. Okay, next question. Regarding Fairphone, how is guarantee and warranty covered in the contract, especially when the users themselves can upgrade their device? That's a question that we often have an issue with when we're talking to brand owners also, that they don't want users, uneducated users, to start opening up their products.
Yeah. It's a typical thing that Apple also has. They have their own machine to actually take the phone apart, and they want to take care of everything. It's a really big discussion in these markets because, of course, the brand owners want to certify and guarantee only if their product components are in there.
Yeah.
Then again, from the procurement side, we usually try to be quite clear that it needs to be workable. So you have to actually look at your internal organization process. If I'm from the government and I have Fairphone, I will still not replace the battery myself because it will be a service department doing that. It will be in service department internally, or it will be an outsourced service. Still, guarantees are usually to try to avoid suing you and problems there in getting fines and whatever. And in my perspective, if you look at circular procurement, a very important driver is to get more into the trust-based relationship with suppliers. So having this discussion upfront with the market, looking at all the details, where do they think it got wrong? Is it only a perceived problem or is it a real problem? And lots of times it's only perceived. Or it's just because they didn't get a contract in the right finance and they try to get other money out of it. Or so it's always sharing risks. And actually, if you compare to infrastructure, which is quite interesting, they have public-private partnerships, and they look at the different types of risks and who's the best to deal with it. So for the technology risks, it would be the supplier. For the societal risk, it would be the government. For financial risk, the banks. So it's never just the one answer to that. But I do think we need to stay out of the thing that you have a technology lock-in and that you can only use the brand battery or stuff like that, because if there are copies out there that work, for procurement it doesn't matter. But it needs to be fit in your process. So you have to talk to your service providers in this.
Yeah. All right.
At least that's my opinion. But
okay. Yeah, I guess it's different for. I mean, if you as a private user, I mean, you have no idea who that private user is. If they still have a warranty on the product.
Yeah, I'm looking now from the business side because there's more. You have, of course, buy your own device. That was a kind of a trend for a bit of a time. And then, of course, you don't have any grip on that. But usually now, most of the, I don't know, in the Netherlands at least, most of it is company devices. So they take care of it somehow. So it needs to be organized in a good way, and you need to discuss that. How do you do? We have the same with cartridges from HP, for example. yeah, this is the only best cartridge, it's the only way it works well, and we're not going to do anything about breaking it down if you don't use ours. It's always a big discussion in our criteria, and but you first have to make very clear how your process is organized. So if you have a specific brand and you can get all the toner cartridges included, then it's no problem. If you have a special separate contract on the cartridges, then you need to make sure that all your equipment is available, is ready for all these different types of cartridges. Yeah, it's a big discussion in circular economy.
Yeah. Yes. All right, a few more questions here. Who are involved in the partnership ICT, and can we follow the work in the partnership?
Yeah, we are about ready to, you can right now send questions to me. The partnership is being set up as it is. We are planning to actually launch it in October, but we haven't got an online registration yet. But please send it to me, and we are looking at the involvement of governments. So from the policy side, that we have a commitment on a higher level of government to say we are going to include circular and fair IT, and we're going to make sure that's included in our policy systems. They might also even look at EPR or eco-design or other initiatives that's taking care of IT. We also look at procurers. So procuring organizations really want to commit to using these criteria and also pilot, and some of them might even want to be involved in the international scene. And we have like an interest group at some point, and they will probably, well, they can follow and get a newsletter and update of what's going on.
All right. Okay, last question, then we have to close. Will the list of criteria be shared? We are interested here in Flanders.
Of course. We are government, of course. This is the whole point of it. Everyone who has criteria already out there in the basics, we're going to work on that. And I know Flanders already did quite a bit of work, so we actually used part of that. One of the things both we realized, not every market has the same appliances available. So that's also, you need to check in your market. But we will, of course, work on this. This will be one of the core things that will attract a lot of attention, of course. If we have some common set of criteria that everyone can use, well, that's helpful for everyone, I think.
Yeah. All right, I think that's all we have time for. The questions keep coming in. I would like to ask you to email these questions to us instead if you want to get an answer to them. You can see on the screen now how to get in contact with us at TCO Development, and of course we will put you in contact with Kuno if the question is more directed to him. And thank you very much, Kuno. It was very interesting, and I'm sure that
I would really like to get all the questions as well. So I'm really intrigued what the questions are.
Okay.
I'm not the expert myself on all the details, so I'll have to refer to some specialists internally as well.
Yeah.
So please.
On a final note, I would just like to say to you, Kuno, that if you want to get in contact with the brand owners and manufacturers, as you mentioned, I think we might be able to help you with that, because we have a lot of contacts, and I'm in contact with a lot of these companies on a daily basis. So
yeah, I heard that already, and that's also what we realized. We were kind of wondering how do we get in contact, and I heard that also TCO, but also other organizations are quite well in contact with them.
Yeah.
But, okay.
All right. Well, thank you very much, and thank you everyone for listening. And we're going to close this webinar now. And yeah, have a good afternoon or evening or morning or wherever you are. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you.